Hola, hola, and buenos dias, GnGs. My name is Trek with 2Ks, and this is another episode of Weekend Crypto, brought to you here on the Gentleman of Crypto YouTube channel. If you don't know, it's the GOC network. Like, we holding it down in all aspects. Y'all have no idea how it's about to, like, just go ripping and running in 2023. We're not there just yet. This is the latter, what is this, like the last week in November? But nonetheless, like, it's a lot going on in this. I'm glad to be a part of it. Shout outs to the homies King Bliss and Bitcoin Zay, aka Isaiah Jackson, author of Coin in Black America. And yeah, I'm excited. I don't know why at the last minute, but nonetheless, I got some stories that happened over this weekend. If you don't understand how weekend crypto goes, the basic idea is I cover between Friday and Sunday and pop it out 8 a.m. Monday morning. And so that way you can go into your week being aware of some things that happened during the week. Do also know that the live stream is done at the 10-ish hour, and sometimes we might overlap on things. I really do try to pick up on some things that they may not pick up on during the live stream. And there are definitely things I look to avoid. Case in point, stories that really focus on price talk. This does not mean there are not other contributors on the channel who are more abreast and more aware and better at talking the price talk stuff, such as the TAFA, things like that, the speculative nature of this space. There's definitely some folks out here who are doing their thing. Stacks, Mohuru, even Mr. Rosa and Crypto Beje when it comes to the NFT side stuff. But nonetheless, I do want to say thank y'all for continually tuning in. Also, not having this whole crypto winter thing deter you from keeping aware of what's going on outside of the price talk, the FUD and the FOMO stuff. Because trust me, there's always some things happening, and we're going to get into some stories here. So, first story is Putin calls for blockchain-based international payment system. I've been saying this for months. The narrative we get over here is the popular take on what's going on in Russia and cryptocurrencies is not what's going on. I'm also not a fan of this whole nationalism, patriotism thing, because if we're really talking about everyone should be included in this or have access and ability to use this technology, I don't like how it's being framed over here in the States, but that's a whole nother thing. Nonetheless, subtitle is the Russian president criticized Western sanctions and urged for a system of independent external interference. So, jumping into some of the highlights here, Russian President Vladimir Putin criticized monopoly in global financial payment systems and called for an independent and blockchain-based settlement network on November 24th. This is the past week happening, right? Story doesn't come out until 25th, depending on who you're paying attention to. Speaking at the International AI Journey Conference in Moscow. Now, I highlighted this here because Serber Bank from last year was the one that was like pretty much given the green light to deal in the mining space, the blockchain space, the cryptocurrency space. And so they're the ones who in part made this event happen. Here's something that was also stated at this event too. The technology of digital currencies and blockchains can be used to create a new system of international settlement that will be much more convenient, absolutely safe for its users, and most importantly, will not depend on banks or interference by third countries. I don't understand exactly how that works considering what I know about the legislation that's being that has been passed in Russia over the last number of months. Everything is being pushed through the banks. Everything is on a KYC basis. So I'm not even understanding what this person is saying. Um, I am confident that something like this will certainly be created and will develop because nobody likes the dictate of monopolies, which is harming all parties, including the monopolies themselves. That is true. Nonetheless, last highlight of this is another development that happened like within this same week. A bill was introduced in the Russian state Duma, the lower house of parliament, on November 17th. So that's within this month, legalizing cryptocurrency mining and sales of cryptocurrency mined. So I wonder if that's more about like the proof of work kind of thing. Understand, like this whole green movement that you see happening here in the West, it's not playing like that outside of the US. It's really not. But nonetheless, these stories get pushed how they get pushed. We are marketed certain ideas and concepts. At least that's how I'm looking at stuff. I'm not telling y'all how to look at these things. I'm just saying I've been doing these news stories things for a while before I was even on the Gentleman of Crypto. And I'm seeing certain patterns of behavior and practices. I'm not telling you what to believe, but I do hope something I say gets you to be a little bit more inquisitive, skeptical about how it's being presented to you. That's what Imma say on that one. Jump into the next story. None that happened, though. So, yeah, the Russia situation isn't playing out the way folks think. El Salvador President Bukele launches special agency to handle all things Bitcoin. What is it? Last week, 2 weeks, the announcement of, hey, the El Salvadorian government, being Bukele as the face, is going to buy a Bitcoin a day. So now it gets into this where it's, hey, we need to come up with something more business structure like, more quote official, excuse me, that will work to facilitate this whole thing. So we get into on Wednesday, El Salvador introduced a digital asset issuance bill for cryptocurrency adoption. It outlines formal expansion of a legal framework for the adoption of all cryptocurrencies in the country. You know what? That sounds like they're not going to be doing just Bitcoin. That's what that reads like to me. I'm not going to get too excited. I'm just going to say I don't think they're going to be the first nation Bitcoin too long down the road. If you're putting in legal framework to do other than Bitcoin, eventually at some point, other things besides Bitcoin will be utilized in some sense of whatever they come up with. Nonetheless, further in the highlights, according to the LinkedIn post by Torres Legal, the government of El Salvador created the National Bitcoin Office to manage all things related to cryptocurrency. Torres Legal is a group of lawyers with business and financial trading operating in El Salvador. Okay. Yeah. Once the lawyers get involved, like somebody trying to figure out some way how to nickel and dime it out the other way. That's just, I'm not saying all lawyers are bad. I'm just saying there tends to be a tendency of repetitive practice and habits. The president of El Salvador and the Ministry of Tourism signed the creation of the entity through Decree number 49. That means you can look this up. Published in the official Gazette of November 17th. The ON BTC will also collaborate with other nations for matters related to cryptocurrencies. Arguably, like they're jumping ahead of the curve to have more regulatory things in position. So when the rest of like Central and what is that, Latin America, as far as the southern part of South America catches up, they already gonna be ahead of the curve and they're gonna know like the ups and downs, the trials and tribulations as far as the legal side of it, the dealing with the international trade side of it. So they'll be able to at least give the other countries a heads up. This is me saying ideally, this is how this would look. What else? What else? What else? So tourism, blah, blah, blah. Oh, so Article 2 defines the the objective of the on BTC, which will be to design, plan, program, coordinate. I'm worried about the word program. Follow up, measure, analyze, and evaluate plans, programs, and projects related to Bitcoin for the economic development of the country, reads the LinkedIn post. How can you say that the legal framework is about cryptocurrencies in general, but then say that this thing, so what is Article 1 then? Because it actually doesn't say what Article 1 is in this particular article. Nonetheless, the links for this will be in the description of it. Y'all can definitely dig deep on this. I imagine Twitter's like somewhere abuzz about this. Y'all know how crypto Twitter be. Jumping on to this next joint, Bitcoin and Ether are not securities. Belgian financial regulators say. All right, so let's jump into this real quick. Going through the highlights, Belgian regulators stated that crypto assets like Bitcoin and Ethereum do not fall under regulations for security since they have no issuer. So there's that whole thing of like, how do you look at sovereign, like sovereign currency is designated based on the issuer entity. But here's my question on this though. How are they figuring this out for Ethereum? Because there is the Ethereum Foundation and it's a separate entity, but okay, let's get into the highlights a little bit more. Crypto assets may still be subject to other national regulations for crypto assets service providers. Okay, the whole money transmission thing. The national regulators will adjust its provisions according to the upcoming harmonized EU laws on crypto assets. That's that whole MiCA thing, MiCA, that the EU is doing. All right, jumping into the other part here, Belgian financial regulators clarified that crypto assets like Bitcoin and Ether should not fall under regulations for security as they have no issuer. I wonder if that means you can redefine issuer down the lines, or no, there's no need to redefine issuer, even though the technology has changed for how you can, let's say, create a currency or create a market. But kind of two different things, market and currency, money, right? Three different things. Sorry. Crypto assets without an issuer, for example, those created by computer code should be exempt from security regulations, the Belgian Financial Service and Market Authority said in a statement on Thursday. It named Bitcoin and Ethereum as examples. Huh. Okay. All right. When I read this the first time, I wasn't 100% certain like what their actual argument or position was. What I'm realizing now is that what they're really doing is there was a hearing or meeting of where they're talking about how they're looking to regulate the space and what types of rules to come up with, but it doesn't mean that's the final rule. That's the key part in this whole damn little article right here. Another line to read, for example, the FSMA claims that their outline is technology neutral, stating that the qualifications as securities, financial instruments, and other investment instruments does not depend on technology that is being used. Crypto assets with payments functions are also not exempt from regulations on marketing and financial. Yeah, all right. This title is misleading, is the bottom line. It is not that the government is actually saying, hey, these things are officially not securities. This is them arguing out how to make the distinction between what it should count as. And the example was given, but there's no official ruling. There's no, this is what the agency officially said is their guiding policy going forward or how they're setting up the rules going forward. So don't get too excited because that joint could change come next year. Jumping on to this next story. All right. Bitcoin publishes, oh, sorry. Binance publishes proof of reserves system for BTC and more assets. I got another story that actually works in tandem with this, but not for what you think. As we've been hearing because of this whole FCX situation, everyone's like running to the whole POR right now, proof of reserves. But as some of us are trying to explain to the non-financial or non-technical people in the space, just because you say it's a proof of reserves, it does not mean it is actually fully accurate or capturing all of what the assets, whether they be a positive or negative assets, on their books. And that's the bullshit that's going on right now that folks are not calling out enough. And this is where I think like the whole self-regulation thing comes in. Let's really start cracking down on these centralized exchanges, because this is where it's really being spotlighted at, because it's the centralized exchanges who are running out there now, well, not everybody, but some of them on, hey, we got the proof of reserve, but it's not taking into account everything. But nonetheless, let me jump into these highlights, right? So today, Binance released its first Merkle Tree proof of reserve system as a show of its commitment towards transparency following the collapse of giant exchange FTX. I'm not even going to get into the number of what they had. It doesn't really matter. When a user deposits one Bitcoin, excuse me, Binance reserves increase by at least one Bitcoin to ensure client funds are fully backed. Read the statement. It is important to note that this does not include Binance corporate holdings, which are kept on a completely separate ledger. That's a whole nother issue unto itself. And this is what I'm saying about the idea of what is on chain versus what is not on chain for how businesses like this are structured and how they run. That was part of the issue going on with FTX. Certain things were on chain, a number of things were off chain, and it's coming out that there were like back doors on how to do stuff that was off chain. So what is the other part? The move comes after exchange is closed. It has hot and cold wallet balances in November 10th report, promising a follow-up of the Merkle Tree POR to allow third-party auditors to verify the holding. The exchange, however, came under fire. What is it? Under fire after the crypto community noticed that it moved 2.7 billion out of its proof of reserves wallet after a few hours of publishing a report. Binance CEO CZ was hard pressed to explain the reason for the transfer, particularly after he tweeted, "If an exchange has," yeah, this line had me cracking up when I first read it. "If an exchange has to move a large amount of crypto before or after they demonstrate they demonstrate their wallet addresses, it is a clear sign of problems. Stay away." So, does this mean that Binance might have some issues? I don't know. But you can't throw stuff out like that and knowing that crypto Twitter be on it, okay? We got sleuths of all types who definitely look to go through the actual transactions and follow things for where they start and where they end up at. Not to mention, you got stuff like Chain Analysis and a number of the other companies that are out there looking at transactions further in depth than what you can just regularly see on Etherscan. Nonetheless, that makes Binance look foolish right now. And I'm gonna get into the other story in a minute about this, but you see what this is. You can jump in a deeper dive on it because the link will be in the comment. Oh, not a comment, but in the description. Matter of fact, like, how are y'all feeling about this? Is this the industry, or at least a part of the industry, as far as the centralized exchanges, actually taking some level of community policing? Because I don't think this suggestion came from us as like the other part of the community who don't run businesses. I don't think it did, because obviously there's still some gaming going on in what they're doing. So yeah, leave some comments. Let me hear what y'all thinking on this one. Let's jump into this next one. American regulators to investigate Genesis and other crypto firms. I'm gonna jump down here. This is basically saying that different state level agencies are looking to get in on the Hungry Hippo game and take shots or try to gain some things out of the things going on in the space right now after the fallout of FTX. Genesis is one of those companies right now. So Joseph Borg, director of Alabama Securities Commission, confirmed that the state had that its state and several other states are participating in inquiries regarding Genesis' alleged ties to retail investors, including if Genesis and other crypto firms might have violated security laws. Barron's reported. All right. It is still unclear what other companies are being investigated. And where's the other line? Barron noted that the investigation focuses on whether Genesis and other crypto companies influence investors on crypto-related securities without obtaining the proper registration. So that line is confusing, because what it is more about is you sold securities and then you didn't register some of them, or you didn't tell the people they were actual securities. So the way they worded that, as far as you influence the people, but what I also find more interesting is that what we see happening right now is the regulators are coming from two sides. It's We don't actually have rules that are related or specific enough to this industry and takes into account how the operational environment is. The rules that they're using is the Howey test, which is based off of use case. It does not take into account technology or operational environment, which is the tech, right? But nonetheless, what's going on here, and I said this, I think, a couple weeks ago, Biden's executive order was the signal for the various agencies to get into the hungry hippo game. And it's happening at the federal level, it's happening at the state level, it's happening at city level. And that's what we're going to see for the next couple of months. It's going to be just bopping down, doing everybody going to try to get their part of what they could legally through their legislative regulatory bodies, through coming up with new bills, through coming up with new, what's the other word for, statutes and things like that, and requirements of like certifications and licenses and stuff. Everyone's going to try to get their part of the industry on a legal standpoint, and it's the hungry hippo game right now. And watch, especially like after X amount of the federal laws come out, wait till you see how many state level laws come out. Watch. But nonetheless, let's move on to this next story. Just saying, some states are not going to be the place to be. Case in point, New York is not going to be the place to be. Jumping over to this next joint and the final joint, which is Binance proof of reserves is pointless without liabilities. Shout outs to your man from Kraken CEO Powell. What's Sean? I think it's Sean's first name. So CEO guy. I'm jumping down into the highlights in particular. So the collapse of crypto exchange FTX revealed the importance of reserves in avoiding situations involving the misappropriation of user funds. While exchanges have proactively started sharing wallet addresses to prove the existence of user funds, several entrepreneurs, including Kraken CEO and co-founder Jesse Powell, called the practice pointless as exchanges fail to include liabilities. And this is what I was saying earlier about the Binance situation. It literally is clearly stated, Binance is only showing what is connected to the exchange. It is not showing what is connected to the actual corporate structure. which also gets into it is not showing the part of the losses, neither negative assets in what they're showing as proof of reserve. They're not showing negative assets. So again, this is another sleight of hand thing. Shout outs to Jesse for calling on the bullshit of it and what's going on in the industry. The thing that I think kind of annoys me about this is you got one or two people saying stuff, but then the rest of the space be just quiet. Why? Because if I show you in full transparency the shell game of what's going on or what is being pushed into the space from traditional finance people, from people who are seeing quick enough how they can make a buck or get their cut in the space from a regulatory standpoint. Because you know what? Let me not run down that rabbit hole. Y'all, I think y'all been around on the Gentleman of Crypto channel long enough. I think y'all seen enough of my stuff to know how I look at some of this thing, some of these stories and these patterns of behavior. Jump into this next thing. Oh, I was trying to actually highlight this, but it wouldn't work for me. I'm sorry, but no, this is not PRO. This is either ignorance or intentional misrepresentation. The Merkle tree is just hand wavy bullshit without an auditor to make sure you didn't include accounts with negative balances. These statements of assets is pointless without liabilities. So Jesse's giving y'all more of the here's how you got to understand it from the inside. The folks who are on the outside not running a business, like it sounds cool. And then he makes another point too about where was it? I think it might have been a slide. Powell called out CoinMarketCap in the past for sharing incompetent proof of reserves as it lacked cryptocurrency proof of client balances and wallet control. He reiterated that reserves are not the list of wallet, but assets minus liabilities. Okay, so you see what I'm saying? Like, it sounds good. And here's the other issue that is also going to be happening in this whole thing is that a lot of these news stories, and I be telling y'all, you got to take this stuff with a grain of salt. Even with the stuff how I say it, you got to take it with a grain of salt. You got to cross-reference it. You got to put it through your thinking process, right? The way this stuff is being framed is not in true transparency, especially in these news articles. It might sound informative, but it doesn't mean it's in full transparency. It's a difference. I promise you it's a difference. Nonetheless, that is the last story. Did I want to get into this one? Moreover, he asked the media. Yeah, that was the other line too. The same thing I said about the media side of it. He's asking the media journalists to not oversell this whole thing, which I can see it happening into next year. They're going to straight oversell this whole thing and make it sound like proof of reserves for at least what is being presented now as proof of reserves as like the quote ideal thing. I don't think it is that. Nonetheless, that is the last story. I'm gonna close that out. And then I do want to say thank y'all for making it until the end. Oh, the announcement that I had to make is later on this week, I will have a new show out with my co-host 3D. We do Twitter spaces, brought it to the big homie King Bliss and Zay. And I got another show on the network, and it's gonna be called Metaverses The Other Side. Just a heads up, it's gonna be a late night show. This is not for the speculative folks. This is not for the trader folks. This is for the geeky folks who want to talk about crypto tech, not crypto tech, but metaverses, plural, blockchain and non-blockchain related metaverses. And we doing some other like visually funky stuff too. I just want to give that heads up. It's going to be Friday, 11 p.m. It's a late night show. This is not for the speculative folks. This is for the more geeky folks or people who just want to hear geeky people talk and geek out about metaverse related stuff. So we get into VR, AR, we get into like Uplift, Minecraft, Sandbox. We get into the whole thing with like TV shows and different movies related to metaverses and like low code, no code ways to be able to build in metaverses, visual things, NFTs, being able to make faucets. Like we get into a number of things, but I'm not gonna lie, we geeking out. I ain't gonna pull no cap with y'all. We geeking out. So some of the things you might be like, what the hell is that? And I do try to explain some of the stuff because even sometimes 3D will go like extra in on a number of things that he says. And I try to break it down as much as I can. I apologize in advance. Please do check out this first episode that will be airing on Friday. Catch it on the replay if you want, but it's on 11 p.m. Also, we actually do the live Twitter spaces on Thursdays at 8 East Coast time, 8 p.m. And so if you're interested in joining on that and just geeking out with us about the stuff that we be talking about, hey, I forgot what movie we're going to talk about this week. But nonetheless, that's the new show. It's called Metaverses: The Other Side. And yeah, that's all I got on that one. Last things to say is it's a Monday at this point, and I do hope that everyone has a productive over a busy day. If you cannot have that, at least be in a good place, in a safe space with good company. And that's the best thing that I think I could wish in the most truest sense of this is what I wish for everybody, right? Haters and all. So other than that, y'all, one.